This is Jeff from WRGE, and I have with me today Steven Pester, who is working with Dine Adventist Radio. And you might be wondering, what is that? Well, his ministry is so interesting because he is working with a radio network that serves the Navajo Indian Native American people. And when I heard about his ministry, I was just totally fascinated by this because I've always admired Native Americans, but they have a lot of needs. And Steven's going to tell us about some of those needs and how his radio network is meeting the needs of those people. Steven, thank you for coming on WRGE today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. So let me start with the word Dine. It's spelled D-I-N-E with a little apostrophe over the E, which they call themselves Dine, not Navajo, because it means the people. Now, it's really cool. It has a whole lot deeper meaning for them than that, but that's generally what the terminology Dine means. So one of the neat things about the Navajo people is they're typically sheep herders. They live a lot in hogans, and even today, their hogans still have dirt floors in many cases. And there still are a lot of Navajo who live on the reservation. Now, the Navajo Nation reservation is the largest native reservation in the United States. It's about the size of West Virginia, and there's about 200,000 Navajo that live there.
Why do you think it is that we don't know about this? I mean, as you know, I've lived in the United States my whole life, but I never knew that the reservation was that big and that there were people there that were still living there. I mean, that just seems so strange to me. That's why I wanted to have you on today to fill us in on, first of all, you know, how can this be that we don't know about this, and what's going on over there?
Well, it's very interesting because they are the largest reservation on the United States, but there's not a lot of talk about them. So you know about the Cherokee and the Trail of Tears, correct? Mm-hmm. Have you heard about the Navajo and the Long Walk?
No, tell us.
Okay, so the Navajo had this property in northern Arizona, western New Mexico, southern Utah, and just the little cornerest part of Colorado. And the United States wanted it. And so basically they brought in Kit Carson, and he walked the Navajo off their property down to southwest New Mexico, which did not work for them because they didn't know the country and to be able to live there. And so that they lost a lot of people, like the Cherokee did. They lost a lot of the Navajo as they did this long walk. So a big part of the thing is they don't feel accepted by the United States, by the government, by the people. And so they largely keep to themselves. So that's probably part of the reason why we don't know a lot about them. They're out in the Southwest, so there's a lot of people that don't recognize, other than knowing the tribe of the Navajo, they just really don't know much about them.
And how did you get involved in this? Because you're obviously not a Navajo.
I'm not?
You're not? Maybe I am.
Well, actually,
maybe we all are.
Actually, I'm what they call a Bilagana.
It's like a gringo.
It's exactly like a gringo, but there's no derogatory term to it. It's just general. You're a Bilagana. If you're not Navajo, you could be black. You could be Indian, Asian. You could be European. If you're not Navajo, you're considered a Bilagana. And so, anyway, the Navajo people are a very wonderful, warm, loving, giving people. There's a couple of families that have already adopted me as their Shema, which is their grandson. So these couple of ladies that have adopted me, I call them Shimasani. But I was working at, Little Debbie snacks?
Yeah, they're delicious, yeah.
Yes, they are. I used to love them. I still do. I still eat too many of them. But I worked for Little Debbie's for almost 20 years in their transportation department. And then one day I got a call from a friend who was a pastor in the Farmington, New Mexico area. He says, hey, there's a group that's wanting to build this radio network around the Navajo Nation. He said, and I know you know radio, so why don't you give him a call? And I said, sure, Mark, I'll give him a call.
Now, you said you know radio. I thought you were working for Little Debbie. So did you know radio?
I did radio. Years ago, I went to school for radio and television broadcasting. I worked at a television network. I worked at a radio network. So I've done a lot of radio stuff in my life because I've always loved radio. Fibbergy and Molly was one of my favorite programs.
Really? Oh, well, I like Jack Benny. We're not that old for that kind of stuff, are we?
We are. Well, but I like to listen to the good old time radio, which is a lot of fun. So Mark called me and said, "Hey, why don't you give him a call?" And I said, "Sure, Mark. I'll call them." And then I asked a couple of questions just to be kind of nice, because Mark is a good friend, and our two youngest kids were seniors in high school that coming year, and so I said to my wife, I said, we have 1 year and then God can send us wherever he wants. We're just going to wait. The next morning in my quiet time, in my devotional time, I read a book by Mark Batterson called In the Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. And he says, when you're presented by an opportunity for God, there's 3 things that you need to do. Pray, dream about it, and do the pros and cons list. And so I went to my wife and I said, I'm sorry. I made the decision, not God. So the two of us did that for the next 10 days or so. And then Mark called me back about 12 days later, and he said, hey, have you reached out to this group? And I go, Mark, what are you doing? He said, I don't know. I said, you're being a God nudge, man, and I don't like you right now. And so we started this process, and I thought doors were going to be slammed closed here, there, and everywhere. Yeah, they were slammed, but they were slammed wide open for me to become the network manager of Dine Adventist Radio. So I moved out to Arizona. My family stayed in Tennessee for that year, and we've just been working diligently to try to get these 3 full power stations on and 4 LPFMs, just like your station.
So when you started, was there any radio at all, or did you start from scratch?
Start from zero. No radio. We had construction permits. That's all we had.
Wow. And are there other radio stations on the reservation, Christian stations?
Good question. Yeah, Christian stations, there's one. It's in San Benito, New Mexico. It's a very small LPFM. But there are other radio stations on there. Most of them are AM. There's a station out there called KTNN, AM 660. It's the voice of the Navajo Nation, and they do bilingual stuff, in English and Navajo. And so we do as well, but from a Christian perspective.
So you have a network of stations now, and from your presentation that I heard earlier, it's just amazing how radio is so relevant out there. I mean, with us, it's just an ancillary thing, I think, but out there, it's very important. So share with us some of the importance of radio for the Navajo people.
Radio is the lifeline to the Navajo. The Navajo Nation is so vast that you'd have to have multiple television stations to reach it. Navajo aren't big readers, and so radio is basically their lifeline. It's where they get their information. It's where they find out what's happening. It's where they do the swap meet, buy and sell that many radio stations do. And so there's a lot of Navajo that still don't have power and water into their homes. But all of them, almost 99% of Navajo have radio. And most of them have it on the whole day, whether they're cooking. One of the best meals that you can have if you go to the Navajo Nation is get a Navajo taco, which is a fry bread with beans, and if you're a meat eater, they do ground beef or chicken, then lettuce and tomato, and it's basically just a big old taco about the size of your hand. But whether they're cooking that, or they're out herding their sheep, or they're out taking care of their vehicles, or out cutting wood for their fireplace, they'll have radio on with them just about everywhere they go. And so for having the opportunity to share the love of Jesus, and the biggest thing that is helpful to them is to hear that they are accepted. So when they hear that Jesus loves them and accepts them, it's a game changer.
So if I would tune into this station, would I understand anything at all, or is it all in their own language?
You would understand about 70% of it, because 30% of it is in Navajo.
And is that hard to produce programs in that language?
Not really, because we have several Navajo speakers that are good, solid Christians that share the information that we love to be able to let them know. In fact, you've got the program Voice of Prophecy?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so back in the 60s, there was a Navajo pastor. His name is Tom Holliday. He went down to California, and he would record these sermons in Navajo. And he's got over almost 300 sermons that he recorded back in the 60s. Well, his family passed those down to us. And so we've digitized them, and we've put them on the air, and many people are blessed. Because the interesting thing about the Navajo language, when you and I talk, it's very direct. But in Navajo is more descriptive. And so if you and I have a conversation that lasts about 5 minutes, if two Navajo were having the same conversation, it would probably last about 10 to 15 minutes because they're more descriptive in their language. And so it takes a little bit longer to get from point A to point B. So anyway, but he makes 30-minute programs. He made 30-minute programs that we're able to air. So 30% of our programming is Navajo, about 70% is English. And we do that very intentionally because we want to have both languages, because most of the elders speak Navajo, but most of the young people do not speak Navajo. So we want to be encompassing of the whole generational gap that's there on the reservation to be able to share both ages that Jesus loves them.
Well, I thank you for coming in today. And if people are interested in finding out more about this ministry, where can they go to online?
Well, they can go to Dine Adventist Radio, and that's spelled, I'm going to have to spell it for you because it doesn't sound like it looks. It's DINEADVENTIST radio, RADIO.org.
Thank you so much. This has been fascinating, and I've always been interested. I call them the Indians. I guess that's not culturally correct anymore, but growing up, I was in the Indian Guides. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Yes. It was a YMCA group, and I've always been fascinated with Native Americans. So when I heard about your ministry, this just touched me. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Jeff, and that's thank you in Navajo.